Good afternoon. Due to failure to meet the first milestone in our agreement with the state, and with the second milestone now at risk, I've directed my administration to begin planning to offset an anticipated $30 million shortfall. In order to compensate for the deficit, the city will begin to institute unpaid furloughs and other cost-saving actions effective January 1st. We will ensure that revenue-generating departments are not impacted by these cost-cutting measures. And most importantly, I want our citizens to know that public safety will not be jeopardized. Again, these actions are necessary to keep the city from falling into further financial distress. We will now move to Q&A.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things the council keeps saying is that they believe they've met the state's line by actually voting on the Miller-Canfield contract. They say if you read the memorandum of understanding, it's not a question of passing it, but just voting on it. And they're not understanding why it is the money hasn't flowed. Can you help us with that splitting of the hairs?
To vote on it, I mean, the state made it very clear in the agreement that they needed not only to vote on it, but to pass it. Otherwise, they were not going to release the money. So when people say that all we had to do was vote, that's not correct.
Mayor Big, when we talked to Gary Brown earlier today, he said, in talking to other council members, that he thought that you had the votes if this was just tweaked and brought back before that. Is there any possibility of that happening? They're meeting again a couple of times in the next few weeks.
I'm hopeful that this can be worked out, but if they don't vote affirmatively, the state's not going to release the money. They've made that very clear.
Are you planning, though, to tweak what you're asking in terms of just the agreement that may be a little more, palatable to them, and hopefully meet somewhere in the middle there?
I think we gave them all of the information that was required. I'm open-minded, but at the same token, the state is holding the cards at this point.
Mr. Mayor, there was a discussion about the idea that the contract that they voted on was not the completed or corrected contract. That there were a number of word changes, the changes in the way the agreement was written that hadn't actually been delivered. I guess it got handed to them before the meeting, and that they felt that they couldn't vote on what they had because it wasn't the corrected one. Is it possible, say, for a special session, say Friday or next week or something like that, to just fix that issue and maybe get the 5 votes?
Hopefully, anything that we can do to fix the problem needs to be done so that we can go forward. I'll let Chris speak to that.
I believe there were 3 issues with the contract that were brought to our attention before the vote, well before the vote, that we addressed. One was that we worked with Miller-Canfield to reduce the rate that they would be charging the city. That's great, we're happy, and I'm certain the council is happy. There was a second request that we reduce the scope, which we also accomplished well prior to the vote. And then there was a third request that we limit the effective time of the contract starting August 1st instead of January 1st of 2012. That also was done before the vote. I think if there was any confusion, that's regrettable, but all those things were accomplished before the vote, and the city is fully prepared to move forward with the contract on that basis.
So where does everything go from here? Does the administration talk with council president, talk with council members to try to encourage another vote soon? Gary Brown, we spoke with him this morning too, indicated that the drop dead date for the city to run into real financial problems is December the 20th. Council is going to be back on December the 11th, so you have that window of opportunity to work this out. How critical is it that you work out this issue and live without the money that the state was about to forward you with these escrow funds?
Jack, you want to speak to that?
I would say that we will not run out of money. We may have to initiate any number of cost-saving measures to avoid running out of money, but the mayor, the administration, we're planning at this moment to implement additional cuts to ensure that the city doesn't run out of money.
So no payless paydays? Just
Absolutely no payless paydays and no missed debt payments.
Where
What
the
other
other
measures
question?
beside unpaid furloughs?
What other measures? We think that unpaid furloughs will do it. We think we can design a program, a cost reduction program that will allow us to meet our objectives with this furlough approach.
How many employees and how many days?
We are working that out right now with our HR department.
Okay.
Is there a reason that this contract has to be with Miller Canfield? That's one of the questions that we're hearing from folks. Why this line in the sand? Why does it have to be Miller Canfield when there's so many other law firms out there?
Well, number one, I'm not going to be dictated to by counsel or anybody else who I use as my legal representative. I have a constitutional right, I think, to pick who's going to represent me. We've been working with Miller Canfield for the last 18 months. I think they are positive. That's who I've chosen. That's who I will continue to work with.
Even
Council
though the
has been
conflict
asking
that
for
some say
details
there is.
about the contract that, with Miller Canfield and some of the billings, but the administration has not released that information. Is there a reason for that?
I don't think that's true, and I will have Prince speak to
Yeah,
that.
with respect to the last question, I'll answer the next question. With respect to the last question, it would also be very detrimental to the city to hire a new law firm at this time because they'd have to spend hundreds of hours that they'd want to build a city for getting up to speed where Miller Canfield is already. So it would be a waste of the Detroit taxpayers' money to bring in another law firm at this point. With respect to the second question, which was
About releasing details of the contract and billing?
yeah, the issue is that whenever you have a legal contract and a legal relationship between an attorney and a client, there's privilege with respect to that information. It's important to any relationship between a client and a lawyer to maintain that privilege. And in order to maintain that privilege and accommodate the request for audit, we created a process where the legal bills of Miller Canfield could be reviewed by the Auditor General's office while maintaining privilege that was carried out promptly upon their request.
What about the
Mr. Ma-
concern about conflict, though, about them,
Yeah.
being involved in PA4, in the consent agreement, in all aspects of this, and then even, helping draw up the milestone agreement in which they're also asked to approve a contract? I mean, these are clearly issues that people have legitimate questions about.
There are three assertions, and I won't say conflicts, assertions of conflicts that I'm aware of, and I'll go through all of them briefly. First of all, Miller Canfield represented the City of Detroit and the Michigan Finance Authority in the issuance of certain bonds. The state of Michigan authorized the Michigan Finance Authority to go forward, and the interests of the City of Detroit and the interests of the Michigan Finance Authority were perfectly aligned. They were trying to get the deal done. So when interests are perfectly aligned, we do not believe, and I don't believe the ethics of lawyers conclude that there is any conflict when the interests are perfectly aligned. The second assertion I've heard for a conflict of interest is in regard to the fact that Miller Canfield assisted in the drafting of PA4 and later assisted the City of Detroit with respect to the Financial Stability Agreement. The City of Detroit chose Miller Canfield because of their expertise, because of what they knew about PA4, and we do not see a conflict there. Certainly the client does not see a conflict. The third area of conflict that I've heard asserted was that they were involved in the milestone agreement. I have personal knowledge of this. I drafted all of the early stages of the milestone agreement. I negotiated the milestones with the Treasurer's office. Miller Canfield was not involved in that process. I did turn my draft of the milestone agreement over to Miller Canfield, and I instructed them to turn it into a legal document, which they did. I don't see a conflict there.
Mr. Mayor, just a question. You just commented a moment ago, you're not going to be dictated to who can be your counsel. You have that right. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what's going on the 13th floor? Are we looking at politics? Are these obstructionists? Are they trying to throw a monkey wrench into this process and putting the city in a deeper financial situation? How is it just that simple? How would you describe it, sir?
I wish I knew what was going on the 13th floor. I don't want to get into politics at all. I'm interested in one thing, and that is to make sure that our city is fiscally stable. And that's my focus, and I'm not going to get away from that. All of these other issues takes us away from our focus. And, you know, some people may call it politics. I'm not going to get into that. I want to stay focused. I want to make sure that for the citizens of Detroit, we want to make sure we're physically or fiscally stable and start to move forward. Every time we lose time, it makes things that much more difficult.
Mr. Mayor, Charles Pugh said this morning on the air that this thing with Miller Canfield is a small snag in the road. It can be fixed. It will be fixed. Has he called you today to set up any kind of
I have
meeting?
not talked to him. I know he's talked to Deputy Mayor Kirk Lewis, and hopefully, once again, to us, we don't see it as a huge problem. I mean, it was their vote or lack thereof that got us where we are. The state has made it very clear that without us passing those 3 milestones, that they were not going to release the money. Nothing would please me more than get this behind us and move on and start to work for the citizens.
Well, do you
Are
think
you
they're
confident you can get $30 million, say, from furloughs without affecting the police, fire department?
I don't think we're saying that. Jack, you may want to speak to that.
I think we've looked at that, we've been looking at it for the last few days, and we believe we can get those savings without affecting public safety.
30
It wouldn't
million.
be $30 million cash shortfall immediately. It would,
No, right.
It'd be a
exactly.
smaller amount and
Right. It would
gradually
be over
growing
time.
through the year.
It'd be over time.
So you're
Two more
saying that
questions?
When would the details of those furloughs be announced?
We should probably have something in place if this matter's not resolved by the end of next week.
One
you
more
address-
question. Do you think
Mr.
that there
Martin or
can
the
be
mayor,
a
can-
resolution that gets that $30 million back in the city's hand?
I think it's very possible, yes.
is bankruptcy an option, Mayor, at all for a city in this?
Bankruptcy is not an option.
Can somebody address the bigger picture in
We're
terms
not,
of
we're
what is
not
the
dealing with
fiscal
bankruptcy whatsoever.
Last question.
fiscal stability agreement? Can you keep working this out going forward? Is this edifice, can it keep the city solvent?
I think the fiscal stability agreement is a tool that we negotiated early on. And it wasn't predicated on whether PA4 survived or not. There are things that we absolutely have to do with or without PA4. Things that need to be fixed in the city. And as long as we keep having these bumps in the road, it keeps us from moving forward. I don't know why that we can't just come together. And some of the recommendations that we're making, we've agreed on 25 different initiatives. We can't get them all done at one time. I'm looking at 5 or 6 different initiatives that if we focus on, it will move us forward and move us toward fiscal stability. We need to do this. We owe it to the citizens of Detroit. Thank you.